Hello, I'm W.T. Edmondson and welcome to Focus. Freedom often causes unbelievable silence. Well, you know, Focus intent, of course, is to inform and educate our public to action. We hope to provide programming that you will be interested in and, of course, move you to do something about the things that you hear today. We have with us Reverend Adrian Hendricks, and he is the pastor of Joshua House here in Jefferson City. Welcome to Focus.
Thank you so much, Brother Edmondson. Glad to be here with you today.
Okay. First of all, tell us a little bit about Adrian Hendricks.
Well, I was born in East St. Louis, Illinois, in a particular ghetto community called The Hole, the Norman E. Owens projects. And I grew up in that environment until about the 3rd grade. And because my mother was going back to school to become a medical doctor, we traveled all over Illinois. So from Southern Illinois to Springfield, Illinois to Chicago, and I came to Jefferson City from Chicago. So I kind of grew up in different climates, from rural to urban to extreme urban to the Jefferson City culture, and I've been here since 1993. I've been here 20 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've been here 20 years, and so my wife, we met on the first day, visiting day, and we've been together for those 20 years and got 3 wonderful kids, and just really excited about what season of life I'm in at this point in time.
Okay, well, that's great. That's great. Tell us a little bit about your educational background.
Well, you know, I got my undergrad degree from Lincoln University, and I particularly looked at a liberal studies degree. I wanted to have something that was broad enough to kind of carry my scope. But then I went further in my education and got a master's degree with William Woods University. And then I went and got another master's degree in church planning and evangelism from Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. And I'm 2 classes away from a 3rd master's degree in theology, which I kind of do on my pastime. But right now, I'm in the middle of a doctoral program. So I'm working on my doctorate degree in organizational leadership out of Grand Canyon University in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
So busy,
Okay.
you know, between reading dissertations and empirical studies and teaching and doing all of what we do with the church. I'm pressing.
I hear you.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. Well, you shared kind of how you happened to come to Jefferson City. How long were you contemplating planning a church before you actually did?
You know, it's really interesting, the path that I've taken to be in this position. When I was called into ministry, I was very young. You know, for me, that was in 1997. And at that time, I had no clue at what that would mean. I had no ambitions to be a pastor. Of course, I've seen and grew up with different pastors. My father's in the ministry. My uncle's a pastor. We've got actually 15 preachers in my family.
Oh.
Yeah, so all around the country we are involved in ministry, but I didn't think that was something that I would be involved in at all. And so when I had surgery one day. I had double surgeries on my throat, so I couldn't speak for a month. And at that time, you know, when you can't talk and you're eating everything through a straw, you just spend time in prayer. So that's what I did. And God impressed on me that I would be a pastor. So once I got off the floor crying and wiping my face off, doing all of that, I began that journey. And it took 12 years. So we were preparing for 12 years for the planning of the Joshua House Church. And in that time, of course, cultivating myself as a young minister, learning what it was to be responsible as a pastor, but then going to college and getting the seminary degree in church planning. One of the very few in this region with that kind of a background, and really cultivating what it would take to build a successful church and to have a training piece so that we can model with others and teach that same skill.
Great. How did you decide on the population that you were going to target?
You know, one of the things that we went through, of course, was a demographic study of the region. And because of my experience here as a young college student, as an African-American male, as a person who really loved church culture, I thought it would be imperative for me to look at what was needed in the city. And from the different spectrums that I would hear over time, there was always this call for a vibrant young church that had a particular sway. And it began there, you know, really kind of cultivating that audience and that conversation, what's needed here. And working, you know, as a youth pastor in Columbia at Second Missionary Baptist Church for 7 years, and being really connected with the college ministry, connected with the youth ministry, and filling those roles, I honed in, if you will, on that audience in particular. So my demographics is that 25 to 45-year-old family, that middle income family that's really looking for a church experience here, coming particularly, you know, mostly out of an urban setting. So that's kind of how we started, and we've just still been shaping it, but we're young. So we're still identifying ourselves and trying to articulate what that vision is as we grow. So we're on baby step number 2.
How long have you been around?
How long has this church been? We launched on September 11th, 2011.
Oh.
So this is our 2nd year. We're coming up on our 3rd year this year. So we're in the initial stages of church planting, church growth, you know, really just at that place where we're establishing ourselves as a young ministry to have that kind of foundation, you know, and lay the framework. So I spend a lot of time teaching and training, you know, training our staff, training our volunteers, developing that spiritual development in others so that they can cultivate that with those that we reach. So we're in the grind time.
Okay. As you were surveying the terrain and talking to various people about your idea of starting a church, what were some of the things that you heard?
Oh, I've heard it all. You know, I've heard from the concept that we don't need another church. We have plenty of churches. I spoke with lots of pastors, especially when I really was firm, because I wasn't sure that Jefferson City would be the place. So after I really took about a year to really think about, would this be the place? Am I investing my life here? And what types of things would that mean? I spoke with pastors from different regions around Central Missouri, and you know, some of them were very receptive. Some of them understood what kind of climate we're in as a country, you know, in history, what kind of climate we're in and what kind of issues that we have from that post-secondary, postmodern viewpoint and the need. So some welcomed it. Now others, you know, with a little controversy may have thought that, you know, typical African-American churches are planted out of a church division or a church split. There's not many churches that pursue planning a church or multiplying a ministry. So it was a new concept for this region, you know, particularly for the Baptist tradition and the churches that I came out of. This was a new concept, but they've been very receptive and very supportive. And we've been really appreciating all of that backing to say that you can go on and you guys can do it. So we've been optimistic.
Yeah. What kind of counsel have some of the pastors given you?
You know, I rely on the pastors around me so much because as a young pastor, you don't know the types of traps that are out there, the kinds of distractions that you may have. And then there's a lot of things that seminary doesn't prepare you for. So when you come out of class, you have this plan and you have this initial drive that I'm going to go and conquer the world. But then there's the reality of, you know, CPAs and taxes and getting legal documents and knowing what's the right season and the right time. So I've been in relationship with all of the pastors and spiritual counselors that have been in my life. Dr. Ruffin, of course, Dr. McNeil, Pastor Sudduth, and Pastor Gould. Even the young ministers and young pastors, we are pretty tight, and we're developing some really good relationships. But Bishop Freeman out of Columbia, these are persons that I've leaned on and have asked them, how do I navigate certain kind of terrain? Because it is hard work. In many cases, it's very lonely work because no one carries that vision like you.
Right.
So trying to get your heart to be expressed through you and into the heart of others, that they will carry it the way that you carry it, it's a full-time job. So they've been giving me things to help me stay solid. Now, I do also have some partners with the Missouri Baptist Association. So Dr. Brown and Pastor Glenn Golden and Ken McCune and Ben Hess. Now, these have been persons that are church planning specialists, and they've been really investing in our church and our success for a multicultural, diverse ministry that has the ability to reach a certain kind of generation that may be hard to reach. So they've been really contributing to my growth, being an ear to lean on and give me sound advice and just help me to bear the load and let me know I'm not by myself.
Okay. Now, what about your membership? As you have been around for about 3 years, how receptive have your members been, and how have they been as far as giving you good feedback as to what's going on and how they feel about your ministry?
You know, one of the things that we did, you know, again, we started from just my family and another family. We started with 7, and we started at the community center hosting once a month church services. So we never knew, of course, that there would be even an interest. We didn't know that there would be, we had a vision, but we didn't know that there would be success in any way. And at this point, we're still too young to say that we've arrived at anything. So for the most part, the persons that have been coming to our church have been those that have been looking and seeking and just hadn't found what they were looking for. And we've been able to provide that kind of spiritual development and that family context that they've been needing. But intentionally, every year we assess our church. You know, we evaluate from a 360-degree evaluation perspective, which is kind of in my background. So we do church evaluation. So we have a yearly annual church survey, and we talk about those things. We ask the questions: how are we engaging you as a participant of this church? How are we engaging you in your spiritual growth and discipleship? How are we helping you to identify your spiritual gifts? How are we cultivating you and your family? How are we helping you to define your role as a father and as a wife, you know, in those kind of contexts? So we try to do those things, but then just because of the diversity and the kinds of interactions that we have all the time, we keep our ears open for how to be more progressive. You know, how do we continue to lay a solid foundation? How do we build relationships? Because we're really about collaboration. And how do we strengthen this city? You know, because there's some things that the faith community must embrace if we're going to have a healthy community.
Great, great. Long term, having laid your plan, long term, what are some of your long term goals that you've set for your church?
You know, I believe that the Joshua House Church has to have, and churches in this region have to have, a long-term plan that is going to integrate the faith community and what happens in the region, what happens in the city. So there's several different components. You know, our church vision, personally, we have a vision for empowerment. We have a vision for a career center. We have a vision for an after-school program that is rooted in our church context. But also, we're looking at the education and academic systems altogether. So it's our desire to see an excellence academy, one that is K through 12, that looks at the cultural diversity things that are needed, and also the historical things that are needed for the audience that we serve. So those are some of the small pieces, but ultimately, you know, we'd love to see in Central Missouri a seminary, you know, that is really about building the Christian faith, about preparing leaders that go out and also plant churches and do other things in the country. So the vision is large enough to have room to grow for the next 100 years. You know, my space in this will still be determined through life, but also other things like having a leadership institute. We have in our vision a goal for a youth camp, you know, an outdoor adventure camp where we can deal with childhood obesity reduction issues, where we can deal with team building types of concepts, but also look at how do we engage around the state those urban audiences that don't have a venue, and those church communities that don't have a venue for summer programming and learning activities. So we're looking at all those kinds of things and trying to determine how can we accomplish them one at a time.
Okay, well, great. As a church, looking at the broad scheme of things, how do you see churches assisting its membership in understanding the importance of not simply taking care of what goes on within your four walls,
Yeah.
but everything that takes place outside your four walls impact the people within your walls?
That's right. Well, you know, we base that on the model of Jesus Christ. Jesus went out and identified not only the internal hurting places, but he fed the people. You know, he dealt with the health issues. He dealt with those disparities between the communities. So it's the same concept. We believe that the churches in this community, but all over the country, have to be relevant in their community. So when we look at what's going on, we understand that different churches do have a different audience. They cater to a different demographic of people. But for us, how are we targeting those that are hurting outside? So we do that intentionally. Mm-hmm. So we know that we have an attraction and a need to develop young people. So we do that. We build our Kids and Family Fun Fest. We do the things in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. Of course, we're working with Lincoln University and the after-school programs. But ultimately, we know that the needs that are going on in the church are all over the city. Mm-hmm. So things like a homeless shelter, particularly for men, mm-hmm. Places that will mediate our young people that are runaways. You know, these are the kinds of things that we know that are out there, that are necessary, but this city may not be prepared for to handle financially or to handle as an agenda, and we're trying to cultivate a conversation as to how to begin to meet those needs.
Mm-hmm. As you know, working on the university campus and having a church in close proximity, what are some of the that you have found some of the unique issues relative to Lincoln University students as relate to faith and just basically being a good, solid citizen?
Well, you know, because of the kinds of students that we receive, there are some issues that we know that are always going to be prevalent. One of the things that we have a problem with in general, especially with minority male students in particular, but just minority students in general, is the transient. It's hard to keep them mm-hmm. long enough to teach them. Mm-hmm. So because we come out of that economic brokenness, because we come out of families that are single parent families, or even what we would consider high risk, you know, dysfunctional families, when they get to college, getting them there is the first hurrah, but keeping them is the hard work. Mm-hmm. So as a church community, us giving you the motivation to be all of what you can be, and to really look at that internal place where you can be healthy on the inside, so that you can go and do the things at school that are going to get you the degree, get you the job, help the economic situation of your family and your community. So all those things kind of interrelate together. Mm-hmm. So for Lincoln students, we've been trying to just be solid, you know, be that solid place, be that place where if you want to be taught, you know that you can find teaching here. Mm-hmm. We try to remove barriers to your education. So whether that be by supporting you financially or supporting you with things that you need, as a good church should, mm-hmm. you know, a little food every now and then, mm-hmm. you know, as a good church should. We try to do those things, but then ultimately, we believe in the leadership capacity of our students. So we look at every student. You're the next leader of the next generation. How can we pour into you so that you can maintain that kind of mindset and grow in that capacity and impact the world? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, you know, some of our niche, and we've been trying to exercise that.
Mm-hmm. What have you found in particular some of the problems that students fall into coming into little small Jefferson City from the metropolitan areas?
Well, you know, I came here from Chicago, Illinois, and one of the things that you see just being from that urban city context is that you think that Jefferson City is wide open, you think it's green in a sense, and it's easy to manipulate. So some of the students and some of the things that we found is that they come in and they're not focused on the reason why they're here,
Right.
and they get distracted at the opportunities of other things that really become distractions, and sometimes their education is in jeopardy. You know, so because we know that those kind of things take place, we try to stay relevant, you know, try to stay relevant in our conversation, in our dialogue with them, and then give them the insight to know that, hey, we've been there, we've been where you are, let me help you miss a couple of obstacles, you know, so I've done that, you know, I've done everything that you, everything that you can get in trouble to do, I've done it, you know, and to say that, well, let me help save you 7 years of brokenness, 10 years of self-esteem issues. Let me help you mediate between all the problems that you have in your relationships because of these choices. And then also, well, what is the future consequences of today's action?
Right.
What are you going to have to pay? So hopefully we'll have an ear and they'll listen to a little bit of what we've got to say and take it in consideration.
Okay. Broadly speaking, how effective has the faith community been in speaking out on public issues that sometimes individuals may feel that, well, the church shouldn't be involved in that?
Yeah. Well, you know, again, the church is a body of believers who come together, and they come together under one identity or one context, but we all are a part of this globe, this larger community. And so, not to say that we have not been effective or our intention has not been right, but when you look at the changing of the seasons, times have changed. The issues that we're dealing with now, it's not that they have not been attempted to be addressed, but because of the criticality of where we are, we know that they must be addressed. And we have to have a united voice, and we have to have a place where we can discuss those things and be a viable leader in that discussion. So for those who may have some tension between should the church be involved or not, you can look at the morality of the country, or the ethic and the ethical climate of our community, and say that yes, we should, you know, we should be involved. We should have a place at the table, and because we have an interest in people, you know, we have a desire to see people healthy, people whole, families united and strong, our community vibrant, then there's no other venue that is more interested in that success than the church community. So we should have a place where we are saying, yes, these are the things that we see. You may not see them, but we deal with this all the time. We deal with broken people, economic disparities, we deal with the education backlash, you know, we deal with those concepts, and because they are so prevalent, we must take some organized action.
And I guess the thing here is that sometimes when the church don't speak out, individuals outside see these things going on and say, well, what is the church doing?
That's
the
right.
church should be speaking out on this.
That's
And the
right.
church saying, I don't know, I don't think I want to be getting into that.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have both sides where they're saying, hey, if the church don't speak out on this issue, who's going to?
Well, you look at it historically, you know, in the early 60s, in the late 50s, you had that dynamic of African-American church culture being the social centerpiece of the community. So there was no agenda that was going to be discussed. There was no town hall. We were the town hall.
Right.
So we were the place where the leaders of the community came together to voice the issues of the family and of the condition of the state. And that shifted in you'd say the early 80s. That kind of shifted, and we got more polished, and we, you know, started to separate some of those things in the high times. But in every crisis, we come back to the same fundamental things. So our families are in crisis. Our economy, we do see the impact, and we feel the brunt of those things. And in those places of disparity, the church and the faith community, that voice is being leaned to, you know, and now we're trying to really answer some of those questions and make plans.
Dealing with young people, I'm sure you have come across or been in conversation relative to the education disparity.
Yeah.
And that disparity is created from a number of different venues.
Right.
How do you speak to parents to get them to the point of understanding the role that they have to play in short-circuiting that disparity?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I've been blessed to be is to have a role with Lincoln University as a regional educator and work with Extension, which deals particularly with impoverished families. We go in, we do an assessment in communities from Fulton to Mexico to Moberly and try to build programs that are going to build the young people. But the commonality that we find is that systematically we don't have the structure in place. So they go to school, they have the classroom experience, but then most of those students who need to have the extra attention, the positive role models, the positive safe environment, they don't have that after school. So places like the after school program, the Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers and Big Sisters become critical to their social and self-esteem development. Mm-hmm. But then beyond that, I was talking to a parent just last week. The son is flunking out of ninth grade. Bright boy, but he's not focused. And I'm saying the same thing to her that we have to say to all of our kids. Every front has a responsibility. The school system has a responsibility, the after-school program, the church, we have a responsibility, but at home, it's a training ground as well. Right. You must engage your children in reading. You must engage them in developing their language. You must engage them in mathematics. So even while you're eating dinner, you know, pop the questions. Mm-hmm. Make sure that this environment is an environment that is stimulating to the mind so that that everyone knows that this is a cooperative effort. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we really started to look at partnering with parents, and we're cultivating even now a parent advisory board for our program that gives them the platform. What's your role in your kid's success? So the school has a place, we have a place, you have a place, mm-hmm. and we have to do this work together. Mm-hmm. So that's been our initial conversation.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to parents who simply do not understand the dynamics that come into play when their kid may get into some kind of issue at school? They go into the school mm-hmm. on fire, yeah. wanting to knock some heads, yeah. but they leave that school in a few minutes after everything is discussed. That kid's still there. How do you talk to those parents to understand that they have to understand that teachers are people, principals are people, right. and how you approach them basically going to impact your kid possibly.
Right. Well, you know, I think one of the things is that there has to be a consistent place for conversation between the education community and the parents. You know, and a lot of times what we find is that we're not at the table until it's in crisis right. mode. Mm-hmm. So we respond based on our normal reactions to other things in our life. So we have problems, we go out and deal with that, and we deal maybe in hostility. But this has to be a platform for creative conversation and ongoing dialogue between the education system and our family, our home. Mm-hmm. So you can't go to the school system and expect that one situation to really reinforce what your children need, or that one situation to be the one-time contribution that you make. Mm-hmm. You know, so we have to be involved. We have to be involved in the decision-making plans. We have to be involved in the PTA and the school board. You know, that kind of dialogue has to be a part of our culture and how we develop in that culture. Mm-hmm. You know, so for the most part, what we've been experiencing is a reactionary point of view. We haven't made plans. We haven't prepared really for preventive maintenance. We haven't prepared to be at next year's academic table. Mm-hmm. And that's really where we need to go. Mm-hmm. You know, we have to start establishing those kinds of relationships so that when crisis shows up, we can mediate it a lot more effectively, a lot more simply, because we've built those relationships and we just haven't built them to the point where they are helping us the way we need it.
You know, we spoke kind of in broad terms here, but what role can the faith community play in shining spotlights on the issues of poverty, racism, economic disparities, and so forth?
You know, one of the benefits of the church is that we understand the background of the hurting. So when one person raises their voice and says, you know, because of what's going on in my world, I need some support, I need help. Well, that one voice is usually muffled out. But when a united voice is able to represent the bodies of families or the people in mass, then we can give a little bit more attention and a little bit more clarity to what the conversation needs to be. So that united faith voice, that united community of churches, that united concept of how do we lift people from their places of poverty, the economic disparities, the issues with employment, you know, those kinds of things, even the health-related things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, that agenda then becomes something that's not dropped.
Right.
Because we have now support. We don't lose momentum. We learn how to build momentum. We can capitalize on what goes on in the year and what's going on because of the types of information that comes in. We can use those different sources to create the kind of momentum that gets legislation and gets policy created and makes some real change.
Well, Reverend Hendricks, I really appreciate the conversation. One of the things that I think we all understand is that collaboration is important. If we're going to be successful in this venture, collaboration is in fact important, and the public would like to extend you an invitation to come sit around the table with us at Jefferson City, Faith Voices for Jefferson City.
Love to. I look forward to, you know, really just being an instrument and being a support wheel and seeing what we all look at in this city as a potential and make it into reality. It has a great, great future, and I'm chasing it.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
We appreciate your tuning in today. We'll see you next time. God bless.